Hey everybody, I was just sitting here thinking that I haven't spoken to my Patreon supporters for a while. So I wanted to say hi, and I wanted to say thank you for your support. I'm sitting here thinking about crypto naturalist tweets and the next episode. And the concept I keep returning to is the idea that many of us, have some sort of power fantasy. It's the superhero, the touching the meteor and you have superpowers, the radioactive spider, the exposure to toxic waste in some cases. And for others, it's becoming the chosen one, learning magic, getting to build an obsidian tower just outside of the town where they grew up, and having everybody know that in all the world, they are the magical one, right? I think that fantasy is often about safety. Well, if only I was this powerful, I wouldn't have so much worry, right? So much anxiety. And I think that's what drives the power fantasy often, right? It's a wish to be free from all the things that threaten you. But it has often occurred to me, I think when I was younger, I would think, I would ruminate specifically on the vampire or werewolf fantasy. But in either case, it was sort of a long-term immortality kind of prospect. And it seemed like a good idea. But it occurred to me one day, I think I was sitting in the woods, as I like to do, sitting on the gnarled roots of a big old tree, and I was watching ants crawl over my boot, and thinking, here in this context, in the context of sitting cross-legged in the leaf litter, watching small arthropods scurry about, here in this context, I have that power fantasy, right? I am impossibly old and big and powerful when compared to any of these individual insects, any of these individual little creatures scurrying around. And it got me thinking about sort of the human version of that. Well, if you lived for thousands of years, if you could do impossible magics, if you weren't vulnerable to attack, to embarrassment, if you were never wrong, how much would you still have in common with the people around you? I think that power fantasy is also an ego thing, right? You want to impress people. You want people to look up to you. Well, you can go outside and sit on a sidewalk, sit in the grass, sit in the woods, and be among creatures smaller, maybe less wise, less informed, less long-lived than you. But what does that mean to you? Very little, usually. You can't impress ant society because you're not one of them. If you were a magical wizard living in a weird tooth of rock jutting out of the ocean, you wouldn't be part of humanity anymore. Because so much of what is about humanity is the vulnerability, that we are short-lived, that we are fallible, that we make mistakes, that we embarrass ourselves constantly. So it's just interesting for me to think that often that power fantasy unravels itself in some interesting ways. And what that means in terms of applicable things that we can think about in daily life. And for me, the applicable thing is, look, if I was a vampire and I was 3,000 years old, the only thing that could keep life interesting, I would imagine, is making a concerted effort to be interested in people, to be interested in the small details of the people around me, to be interested in their hopes and dreams, to be invested in what they say to me. And, that's something that you can think about completely divorced from that power fantasy trope we're talking about. Life is so much richer when you make a effort of will to make a craft out of being interested in other people. That's something I struggle with. I'm somebody who likes to spend time alone in the woods. I like to spend time alone a lot. And in these quarantine days, it's something that I think a lot of us are struggling with, is how to maintain these connections. But the richness in life doesn't come from power. It doesn't come from finding ways to not be vulnerable, to be beyond mistakes. It comes from being interested in sort of the daily artistry of other people's lives, I think. And then that concept, as I sit here and ruminate on it, thinking about my writing, relates back to nature and that anecdote I said to begin with. The sitting on the tree roots, the thinking about the ants. You have that power in the context of the ants. And then you can look up at the trees above you and realize that they have power that you can't understand or relate to. The years don't touch them like they touch us often. They can stand outside and make food from the sunlight. Wouldn't that be handy from time to time when sort of the pressures of modern capitalism bear down on us? Well, worst case scenario, I go stick my toes in the mud and make food out of sunlight. Ugh, that'd be nice. That'd be a power fantasy I have trouble giving up. Anyway, I thought I'd share some thoughts with you. Sitting here at my desk, I have to get up at 5 a.m. So, of course, when I feel pressure to go to sleep is when all these thoughts arrive at once. We'll see how these thoughts turn into tweets or new sections in the new Crypto Naturalist episode. They always do, just not always in the way I expect. Thank you again for your support. If you want me to do more of these videos, these sort of chat videos, just let me know. They're easy enough for me to do. I'm just not sure that people want to listen to me sit here and talk to myself. Thanks again. Hope you're doing great.